In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. So racism is a big topic that is talked about just around every corner and every platform, and it's on everybody's mind these days in the wake of the murder of George Floyd, or the death of George Floyd. And racism by itself is a force, right? It's a force that is fueled by the discrimination, the anger, the judgment that resides in somebody, right? Resides in somebody, and it's applied towards somebody who is different, is applied towards somebody who is of a different culture, nationality, ethnic background than the individual. And it manifests itself in so many different ways, whether it be prejudice or discrimination that we talked about, and all these different ways that it manifested is captured in this idea of racism. And recently, I was talking with somebody about it, and they brought up this idea of how do we combat racism? And because they were describing it as a force, a force against somebody, that this force needs to be met by an opposite force. Right? And only around, in recent weeks have I come to understand this term just a little bit better. I'm still in my infancy. But this idea of anti-racism is how we combat racism. Right? That while the force of racism is fueled by discrimination and judgment and anger and prejudice and all these different things, right? And it causes a force against somebody, what we must do to combat it is come back with a different force, right? And the force must be intentional. The force must be proactive. It can't be passive. We can't fight something that is a force with passivity. It's just not going to work. We're not going to resolve the problem if we're just so passive about it. We must come at it with a force. And I never thought about this idea of racism within that idea or that concept of racism as a force, and in order to combat racism, there must be anti-racism, a force that opposes it. And as part of our faith, right, I think that idea of anti-racism fits in so well with our faith because we look at our actions as Christians as not something that will come passively into our lives, but it must be something that is very active in our lives. And today's gospel really talks about that, coming from Luke chapter 6. And today's gospel brings about this idea that our action as Christians isn't one of passivity, isn't one that is just going to naturally flow out of our lives. Because to be honest with ourselves, if we're honest with ourselves, what flows more naturally for you? Love and forgiveness and compassion, or anger, judgment, and criticism? Which one comes out of you more readily? Some people, yes, they're like great people, all right? But I'm the first to admit that love and compassion and forgiveness don't flow so naturally from me. It is something that I must be intentional about. And I think a lot of people sit in that camp where it takes a lot of energy to be loving. It takes a lot of intentionality. And if we look at today's gospel, Luke starts off and he says this, "But I say to you who hear." Pretty much people who actually want to understand what the message is going to be. All right? And he says, "Love your enemies." Jesus speaking. "Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. And pray for those who spitefully use you. To him who strikes you on one cheek, offer the other also. And from him who takes away your cloak, do not withhold your tunic either." In any of those instructions, if you put yourself in any of those situations, faced with an enemy, faced with somebody who's cursing you, faced with somebody who is using you, faced with somebody who is trying to take stuff away from you, what is your natural outfit? What is your reaction to that? But yet Christ commands us and instructs us and models for us what should be the response. If we're to live in a world of love, what should be our response? To love our enemies, to do good, to bless those who curse you, and to those who strike you, turn the other cheek. There's nothing about these commands that is very passive. These are all very active instructions. And these are all instructions that aren't naturally going to flow from us unless we are very intentional about it. Unless we want to make these a force in our lives. Versus the other forces that can very easily come out of our hearts, which can be of anger, which can be of discrimination and judgment towards one another. Those forces come out of our lives. But Christ challenges us to bring about a different force. A different force. And if we actually look at the readings of today, we see some of that happening. And we'll go to Acts, where Acts was describing when a time was when St. Paul was in the city of Corinth. And St. Paul was not treated nicely in Corinth. And St. Paul really struggled with the church in Corinth, so much to the point that he came back one day, he's like, I'm throwing in the towel, I'm leaving. And what did the Lord say? Stick it out. Stick it out, because I got people in this place. It wasn't easy. He wanted to go. He wanted to throw in the towel. Let me just go to the next city. It'll probably be much easier than whatever I'm dealing with at this city. Let me go. And the Lord said, St. Paul, sit. I have people in this place. And he stayed. And he preached. And the Lord gave him away. It wasn't easy for him to do that. It wasn't easy for him to do that. And it's not easy for us to show love, even to those that we love. It's not even easy for us to show love to those that we love, right? Because we get into it with our loved ones, right? We can go tooth and nail with our loved ones, right? We can fight with our spouses, okay, but we love them. Right? We can be judgmental and criticize them, but we love them. Okay? We can be harsh on our kids because they drive us crazy, but we love them. All right? And we have to be very intentional about our responses to those that we love. Right? It's not easy. Children, like when we look up to our parents and we don't like what they're saying, like sometimes we can be very sharp and judgmental of them, their mentality, the culture that they come from, whatever the situation may be for you. But we can show very negative attributes and behaviors towards them. And it's because, as humans, we have this ability to just sit where it's comfortable. We like to be where it's comfortable. Right? And what does the gospel today describe that? Right? It says, but if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that for you? For even sinners do the same. Right? He's describing a life of choosing what is comfortable. It's comfortable to be around people who are like-minded. It's comfortable to be around people who speak the same language. It's comfortable to be around people who have the same political views as you. This is comfort for us. It's easy. It's easier. Right? Because I don't have to work at accommodating. I don't have to work to see your perspective. I don't have to work to understand you, even though your language is a little bit different or your culture is a little bit different. Right? All that takes energy. All that takes intentionality. It takes a bit of self-control. It takes discipline. And so it's really dangerous, actually, for us to allow ourselves to be in a place where we find it easy or easier to love those who are very, very much like us. Right? Which actually, if you kind of go back to our beginning conversation of racism, what does racism really promote? Fairness to those who are like me. Acceptance to those who are like me. Right? Discrimination to those who are not like me. And what's Scripture talking about today? If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. We weren't called to live like that. We weren't given a model to follow that embodies what we see throughout our societies and our cultures and the world. Christ came and he gave us an example. And he gave us an example because he knew that without an example, how would we know what it was to love our enemies? How would we know what it looked like to bless those who are cursing you and bless those who are spitefully using you? How would we know what it looks like to turn the other cheek when you're getting smacked? But Christ possessed all the power and the ability and the capacity to love those who were attacking him. And so he modeled it for us. And not only did he model it for us, but he called us to it. He called us to that life. To love those who are different. To love those who come from different backgrounds, different languages, different skin tone. He called us to love all. And there's no credit to us as a church or as a community or as an individual if all we do is put ourselves in a place where we are comfortable with those who look or speak or think just like us. So especially in these times, we need to reflect on ourselves, both individually and as a community, and ask ourselves, am I looking for those who are just like me? Am I okay with those who are just like me? Because if we are, one, don't be ashamed because you are not the only one struggling with it. The point of the question is not to bring about shame. But the point of the question is to bring light into how I am and we are living, and to reflect on what God has called us to, the life that God has called us to. Because that's always our spiritual walk, is to shine light on what's happening inside and allow that light to bring us towards God himself. And so we need to reflect on ourselves. If I have these prejudices, which all of us do in some way, shape, manner, or form, we all have these prejudices in our hearts. We need to uproot them. We need to shine light on them. And we need to challenge ourselves by calling on the power of God to love those who are different. Because to love in this day and age, a common love, or a love that is founded on my power alone or my ability alone, will not suffice. It will not make any change. But only a love that is rooted and grounded in God, who is the author and the modeler of the love we are to show today. Only when I'm founded in that love, in his love, can I go out and show love my enemies, to bless those who curse me, to turn the other cheek, and to give without holding back. That is a godly love. That is a godly love, and that is a love that our world so desperately needs. And that is a love that this world also looks at our churches to look and provide and be an example of. That's what we should do as the body of Christ. So we'll take a minute to meditate on that. And glory be to God forever. Amen.